Hey guys, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hey, Will, glad to have you here.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Just slowly letting the other participants into the room, into the waiting room. Yeah. Hey, Andrew.
Hey there.
Yeah. I think we're gonna give it a few more minutes to let everyone else get logged on, and then we'll go from there.
Good to see you, Kevin.
Good to see you, Andrew.
Checking out the new committee, huh?
Yeah, I just Steven's got some ideas that maybe we can collaborate. So I'm just I haven't sent any. I just want to brainstorm and see what you guys have in mind.
Sweet.
Yeah, I was just thinking I haven't seen any posts about the West Virginia bike lanes recently. I think I might need to go update the post on Nextdoor.
Don't do that. No.
That conversation has moved to other venues and hopefully will soon disappear. And just be a nice piece of infrastructure we can all enjoy.
I rode it the other day on my cargo bike with my daughter, which was a harrowing experience before, and it was pretty nice, even with all the leaves. So it's funny because we've raised it with DPW, like can we prioritize the bike lanes that are actually like transportation facilities rather than just like the curbsides that are not? And they basically said we're on a schedule and we're going to stick to it. And we're going to get to all these spaces. So, but I'm aware there's a lot of leaves there as well. The most recent changes we made to it were we converted, I think it was central to one way to add like 5 or 6 parking spaces, but there were some other reasons that I think were floated as why we were changing to one way for like operations and stuff. It was also a very skinny street to begin with, but how is that working for everyone? We haven't heard anything bad about it, so I think that's usually a sign that it's working.
About the change on Central specifically?
Yeah. So like, the big critique was like right over there where there's a lot more homes, there was too much parking take. So that was a way to, do something that was part of I think an older TSI, and to add, maybe it was like 12 parking spaces, like 6 on each side of the street. So hopefully that sort of helped out the overall pinch of parking, but it's actually like more in that localized area than was there before. If it's an absolute supply, but sometimes it's not about the absolute supply. It's like the perception of like, well, there was one in front of my house before. Now there's not, even though, 200 feet away or something.
Yeah, I know there are people still complaining about the whole thing. And so I don't know if that specific block, those people now aren't upset, but so.
Yeah. Well, I'm fairly local to you guys. I live just at 14th and C Northeast, so you're like my neighbor to the north. And I traveled through there a lot for lots of reasons. Probably, just like looking ahead, I'm extremely excited about the new plan for the Arboretum that the Arboretum came up with, which is to sort of de-emphasize it as a place to like drive around in circles and to get much more like drive in and park if you would like, but the experience of being in the Arboretum is you'll either be on a shuttle going around to these places or you'll be walking or biking on your own as part of their overall sustainability and sort of like rethinking efforts. So if you hadn't heard this, they have a whole plan that's like publicly available. I think NCPC has reviewed it, or maybe it was like the Commission on Fine Arts, but the plan is to open up the Maryland / M Street entrance that's been closed for like 30 years and make that a bike ped entrance, which would be terrific. And then when we commented on it, we said they're going to make a new vehicular entrance off of Bladensburg is their idea. and they were going to close the R Street entrance or make it just for like employees. But we said, let's leave that a bike ped entrance also. So if you wanted to cut through the Arboretum on your way to, you know, the new stuff they're building between Montana, West Virginia, and New York, like you would have a really nice, almost like park-like experience going through that route. But that's probably the biggest, you know, that and the Arboretum Bridge that I think is it's supposed to deliver in like 2023, or at least be under construction by then. Those are kind of the big deal transportation projects. And if you didn't know, Bladensburg they just kicked off my colleague Karen at DDOT kicked off a big study to look at Bladensburg, the whole corridor from Starburst to like the district line. So
that's actually on our agenda for tonight.
Aha, cool. Yeah, so think about what you guys, you know, think the corridor should do and be, because I think this is a great opportunity to really change it from a very auto-oriented place. You know, and it used to be just not that long ago when I moved to the area, it was like up and down from Starburst. It was pretty much just muffler shops and like brake shops and transmission shops. There's still some of those, but more and more of those are closing and turning into, you know, primarily like apartments, because it's like the zoning is by right for apartments. So, or condos, you know, that kind of thing. So it's sort of almost like not very intentionally planned. It's just like an accident of zoning that those things can go in without any sort of, you know, major discussion. But at the same time, you know, that like we have this massively new dense neighborhood that's on like a pretty dangerous street with really skinny sidewalks that were scaled at the time. It was like auto shops all along the border.
And I think that's just a good example of another one of the many intersections between zoning and transportation, which is one of the reasons why we have Kevin Horgan here tonight, who's the chair of our Zoning and Development Committee.
Great.
Yeah.
And
you know
so many of you, I think I've like crossed paths with some of you in the past, and I'm glad to, you know, see you all here. Give me a heads up if you want me to jump into my presentation. We can get right.
Sure. I think we should probably get started. I know a couple folks are running late, so I'll just let them in whenever they log on. And I'm trying to stay off video as much as possible because my connection's a little tentative right now. But yeah, well, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I think I probably won't be on the right starting slide, but we'll get back there in a hurry. Let's make it bigger. I think that's right. And so, hi, I'm Will Hansfield. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a bike planner at DDOT, transportation planner more broadly, but bicycle program specialist. So through that, I'm one of two people chiefly responsible for putting together a connected, protected network of on-street bicycle facilities suitable for use from everyone, all ages and abilities, from pretty much 8 years old to 80 years old. That's really the big mission. We're going to be talking about 17th and 19th, which are projects that are south of your SMDs or your full ANC, but obviously related. And I'll talk about another project that is it's in your SMD that's very directly related. That I am not going to be the driver on that project, but my colleagues at Transportation Engineering and Signal Design are going to be doing. So we're looking at 17th and 19th, which are both corridors that have kind of the weakest form of bike infrastructure for most of it, the Sharrow, the way they were used on those corridors. And it wasn't very recently that, there was very recently that they were kind of part of a capital project at DDOT. Really kind of finished the planning phase in like 2015. They were implemented in 2016 and 2017. And the sort of like promise to tame traffic has not been realized, let's put it mildly. So now we're taking another fresh look at it with the idea that these are important links in our connected, protected bikeway network. I'll show you some maps in a minute, but here's where we are. We're at concept planning. We're trying to put together kind of a workable overall theme and idea for every block of the corridor, and I'll show those at the end. And we will then move on to doing traffic studies in the next, end of this year and the next year. We'll come up with a preferred concept. We'll refine that. We'll do some, periods of public comment. We're trying to get to a construction date in fall 2022 so that we can have it done within about a year from now. And then just related, the C Street project, C Street Northeast is under construction now. It should also deliver about June 2022. In 2020, I have a little typo there. So anyways, the bikeway network we're trying to do, there's a lot of benefits. I think, this crowd, I think is well aware of them, but let me just call out a few that may not be so obvious, but certainly for like economic development, what I don't have on the site, probably should, is just like local retail sales seem to actually be better in places that are bike and foot traffic accessible. There's certainly the CO2 emissions. One that's come up recently that's very interesting is resiliency. My own story about like how bikes are resilient is in the 2011 earthquake, when my very pregnant wife was in like Foggy Bottom at work when they were evacuated from their building. Didn't go back inside. The metro started by operating at like half speed, and then pretty soon the platforms were so crowded you couldn't even get down. The street network failed, and so like all the lanes for every road were filled with cars, and none of them moved. It was complete gridlock. And the way I got her out of downtown is I rode a Capital bike share over, sat her on the bike share, and then walked home. It was about 7 miles, but I was able to roll. She was 8.5 months pregnant, and so was not really in a position to walk 7.5 miles. So that's an example, but for evacuations and other things, bike routes and bike lanes and trails especially are extremely good. Which I always like. I think that's sort of not too obvious to most. We start with sort of our 2005 bicycle master plan. We actually achieved all the goals in there. We got to, which is actually the hardest thing in my lifetime to change about the transportation network, is something called mode share, which is like how or what mode are people choosing. And kind of when I first started being interested in transportation planning in like 2003, 2004, I was in LA. And like nobody walks in LA. True, pretty much, right? And if you do, you're kind of treated like an alien species. But that's around what we had in LA at the same time. 1% of trips by bike, maybe generously. Same in DC. DC has invested a great deal in bike infrastructure, and so by 2015, we actually had 5% of trips by bike, and now we're probably at like 7 or 8%. And there's some neighborhoods. So Capitol Hill and like I think close in like Trinidad is a good example. They're really high. They're like at 10%, 12%, 15%. Adams, Morgan, Shaw. We also have a bunch of goals from Sustainable DC. One of that's really interesting is that 25% of all commuter trips should be walking and biking trips in the next 10 years. And we should actually reduce automobile. This is in writing, by the way. I didn't make this up. Reduce automobile trips from 43%, which is around what it is today, to 25% of all trips. We also have the Vision Zero goals that say, 0 fatalities, right? No fatalities acceptable. We're going to do everything we can to get to 0. And then we have Safe Routes to School, which is the simple premise that children should be able to go on their own to school or with a parent and arrive safely. I just want to show all the crashes in the 2 corridors we're talking about. So 19th. And just orientation wise, north is to the right in this diagram. I think you'll be looking to the right. I have a legend there at the bottom, but just to fit it all in, we had to turn it sideways. So the right side is going to be Benning Road, and the very bottom, you can see Barney Circle. And you just see these clusters of crashes. That's a lot, right? And the reason that there are so many crashes is the road design. It's 2 lanes in each direction, one way. That pattern just generally is set up to have a lot of crashes. You can also see there's a huge cluster along Benning Road. So that's an area of future focus. It is one of the more principal arterials in the city. Lots going on there. Bike lanes are an important climate response for anyone who's concerned with the issues of climate change. Sorry. Down at the bottom of the chart, that's the CO2 impact of internal combustion cars. Just slightly above it is electric cars. You can see it's a lot more in the manufacture and less in the operations, but it's not all that great, all told. Transit is excellent. It's down there towards the bottom of the chart, but at the very bottom is walking, and next to that is biking. Slightly above that is e-bike. You also have light rail, right? Electrified light rail, like the streetcar. I think it's important to kind of get this out there that, what is scientifically necessary to do right now exceeds what is politically possible. And I'm trying to change that, along with many people at DDOT, so that we can put in the projects that will actually help us get to a low carbon future. And I'm under no illusion that just doing it in DC is enough, right? But DC is a leadership city, right? We get millions and millions of visitors annually. And unlike, European cities that we sometimes can point to, if they see it here, they go, well, DC did it, and maybe we can. And so we are leading the country. We're one of probably the top 3 to 5 cities always on any ranking of bicycle friendliness and bicycle accommodation, though I don't think we do enough, and I'd like to do it faster. Here's kind of where we are today. We used to be catering just to the person on the right, the fast sort of I'll ride in traffic type cyclists. I think we're pretty good generally for like people who are kind of more commuter oriented, but what we really want to plan for is that user group on the right. It's like mother and child, or somebody who's older, that if we plan around their sort of stress tolerance and their needs, then we really cover everybody in our bicycle network. So that's really the design customer. Here's the 2 corridors. So in the original Move DC from 2013 wasn't considered as very important, but we have a new version and both of those corridors are on it. And so we're going to be working to try to make them work. But also for 5D, you can see like some of the other routes that we've got on there. So we have Maryland Avenue going all the way diagonal up to meet with M Street going east-west. We have Bladensburg, and we have 17th Street, and then 17th Street kind of hooks around, become Mount Olivet. So all those corridors are envisioned as having some bike facilities on them. There's a bunch of types we can talk about. Just for C Street, this is maybe not so relevant for 5D, but this is like the intersecting street. And it has this really top level, best in class type infrastructure that they're adding to the corridor, right? So raised crossings all over the place, separated bike paths, a real game changer in terms of like what we're actually building. This is the kind of stuff that I tend to work on, right? So within the existing curb to curb, we will use paint, really it's plastic, it's thermoplastic, and but anyways, colored pavement markings and equipment to change how the road operates and who gets to use it safely. There are a bunch of reasons why we're trying to change this particular corridor. A lot of the general thrust is like we really need to get this network of bikeways in place so that we can meet that 2032 goal of replacing a lot of driving trips with bicycling trips. It's not going to happen if we don't provide safe places for people to ride their bikes. We get a lot of actually it's not TSA, I think it's TSIs now, but TSIs for the 17th and 19th corridors, a couple particular intersections where those high crash rates are. There's an overall interest in diminishing the existing traffic dangers along those 2 corridors from that result from that two-way condition. There are some new uses like the RFK fields that are proximate. There's the 2 schools, there's Elliott Hine and Eastern, which I think, I'm sure there's some students from your SMD that go there, and we would like to support them if they want to bicycle there by themselves. There's also an important bike trail link to the Anacostia River Trail at Barney Circle, and our overall interest in addressing some of the safety issues along Mount Olivet 17th, which will come later. But this is the sort of overall corridor we're going to be looking at. I've sort of tried to divide what we're talking about, and I will make a slight change. The buffered bike lane section of 19th that we outlined here, when we presented to ANC 6A and 6B, they really asked us to, apply ourselves and try to come up with a better, a more protected version than just a buffered bike lane. But mostly we're doing protected bike lanes throughout the corridor, or we're doing some sections of 2-way cycle track. So it's going to be a mix. I've done some cross sections just to show you what that looks like. So here we've got from Benning Road to East Capitol. Right now, this is that 2-lane section with sharrows. And what we would do is instead convert it to be a protected bike lane that's behind parked cars and one travel lane. Now, the parking lane could be set up so that it could at times become a rush hour lane or something. I think what we heard from the NC 6A and 6B is they do not want that to happen. They do not want a rush hour lane. They would prefer to have full-time parking, and I think that's probably the direction we will likely go. Right now, 17th from East Capitol to Potomac Street is set up as sort of a regular bike lane. There's a lot of misbehavior by cars that use that as like kind of a passing lane or other, they do other aggressive things. So what we'll do is change that to set it up in this way, where you have a single southbound 11-foot drive lane. The bike lane will be behind cars, so that it's very well protected. And then we get down to the section along the Congressional Cemetery. This is a good opportunity to actually kind of change the pattern. This is that trail connection, right? At the very southern end is where you can connect to the Anacostia River Trail. So we'll try to do a crossover right before this, get to crossover bikes to get to the from the west side to the east side of the road for southbound, and we'll have a 2-way cycle track there, so people can go both ways coming to and from the trail. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit too. Because we have that 2-way cycle track on 17th, we thought it was a reasonable idea to continue it onto Potomac Avenue on this side of the cemetery. That was when it was a very surprising number of crashes happen here. It is one of those areas that goes from a 2-way street to a 1-way street, and the 1-way portion starting at 18th and going to 19th has 2 lanes, which is just generally a dangerous pattern. So we'll do something like this. And then let me go in reverse order. So then we'll come up, direction travel from 19th Street. So now we're going to go from essentially like Potomac north to East Capitol. Again, we would seek to do this as a 2-way cycle track over in this part for a couple of reasons. One, this is sort of an edge street, right? Beyond here is mostly institutional uses. We have a new neighborhood essentially being developed with Reservation 13. Some of that is built out, like their phase 1 is built out now, and I think is on its way to full occupancy. They're building stuff behind that. We'll also connect to the trail. But when there's new neighborhoods being built, we want to really do everything we can to encourage the new residents or people who move there to choose bicycling as their first choice, or transit and walking. All those mix of uses. So doing it with a 2-way cycle track would be very supportive of that. The next 3 blocks really from East Capitol to C Street, we have 2 large school campuses, Eastern High School and Elliott Hine. Right now we have a couple of dangerous crossings, like at Constitution, probably the worst one because it's a multi-lane unsignalized crossing. Though they just put in a new rapid flashing beacon, which will help to some degree, but that's just a crossing that we should not have anywhere in the city, because they're likely to result in crashes when you have multiple lanes with an unmarked or unsignalized or uncontrolled pedestrian crossing. So this will continue that same 2-way cycle track pattern past the schools. That should assist a lot more children getting to the schools by bike. This will intersect with that big C Street project, and also help form this network, and the network of that will help kids go to RFK Fields for soccer practices and football practice and things like that. Like, we really want to support that level of independence and bicycling. And this is that part that I think we are going to rework this. I don't yet have a final version, so I'll show you the slide I had before. But this, I think we can swap some of the parking around and get the bike lane protected. It might be a little narrower. This is a much narrower cross section of street. I think it's like 20, when you add it up, that's it's like 25-foot wide cross section, which is pretty skinny. So we'll do some jujitsu and try to fit that in. It also has a much lower traffic volume all told. And I think that, that covers the overall like cross sections And so what the big picture is, and I'll tell you the trade-offs, right? So again, it's south of you guys, but when we do these protected bike lanes, at the intersections, particularly in any alley entrances, we need to create setbacks from parking setbacks so that you can't park so close to the driveways or alleys or any other like cross street. And that's so you can see the bicycles coming and they can see you. We also do setbacks with any new project for pedestrian crossings. So like any new crosswalk, not new crosswalk, anytime we do work and sort of refresh crosswalks and things, we often will put in a 25 or 40 foot setback from the intersection. And it's so people can see pedestrians as they start crossing and vice versa. So the pedestrian can see any vehicles coming towards them. It's one of our main safety interventions to do that. So there is a parking trade-off when you do protected bike lanes versus the traditional bike lanes. We're also trading off capacity, right? Rush hour lanes, obviously more cars can fit through that pipe. When we talked to ANC 6A and B, they basically said, well, yeah, that's the problem. We do not want to be the corridor that all these cars come from. And I when I look at the sort of big picture scale, the corridor really starts at like 9th and Mount Olivet, right? If you think about the sort of light industrial zone north of New York Avenue on like Brentwood Parkway, there's a lot of like truck traffic, and what we see coming down Mount Olivet and then 17th, and then as you cross Benning on 17th, you see like big heavy trucks. And my sense is that they're trying to go to one of the freeways like DC 295 or I-295, and that rather than go onto New York Avenue, which is that's the big principal arterial in downtown, and then you get on to 395, rather than do that, which is frequently congested, they're choosing to say, I know a better shortcut. I'll just go down Mount Olivet and 17th, and I'll go to Barney Circle and hop on the freeway there at, or cross Pennsylvania Avenue and do it that way. And so it's sort of just like one of these cut throughs that for lots of historic reasons, traffic engineers have made it a very attractive kind of higher speed route, even though it goes past a lot of people's homes and front doors, and that's not, where you want to have a bunch of cut through traffic. So anyways, that was sort of a big topic of discussion, that like that is not a desirable condition. The 2 lanes is not desirable, and they would gladly have a constrained right of way compared to what it is today, and have that lower amount of traffic, and that would be a good thing for them. Big picture, there's a lot of things that this is working towards to help all those plans we talked about earlier. I strongly believe that at the end of this project, if we do it the way we've sort of framed up, we will have fewer crashes, fewer high-speed crashes, especially, and fewer pedestrian and cyclist crashes on all these corridors. There are some rush hour lane trade-offs, but again, I think it's an acceptable one. But this is why we've been going around and sort of centering this on what the ANCs are telling us. We want to know what else is important. We want to know the right balance of trade-offs, and we want to hear from you, because these are both like 1.5 mile corridors, and it's hard to get to the level of fine detail that everybody who lives along them might know and think about. And then, since we're talking about 5D, before I get to my contact information, the project that I am not prepared to talk about, but I wanted to at least alert you to, our Transportation Engineering and Safety Division has looked at 17th north of Benning as a good candidate for a road diet. Again, you have this 4-lane cross section. You have a couple places where you have multi-lane marked but uncontrolled pedestrian crossing. So there's no stop sign, there's no stop light. Those are inherently dangerous. And when we find them, what we try to do is make it so that there is just you're crossing a single lane at a time and not multiple. In fact, we just had a fatality on Wheeler Road Southeast at one of these types of 4-lane crossings. And it wasn't even at a busy time of day or night. It was like, 10 p.m. or something. And just the dynamics of crossing multiple lanes for a pedestrian are inherently tricky and risky. And so we try to use the vision zero approach. And essentially, when we think about safety first, it means what it sounds like. Safety is first, even before traffic volume considerations. And so I, for one, am willing to entertain pretty radical traffic impacts if I can make the road safer. And in this case, I think on the corridor that I'm working on and the corridor my colleagues are working on, I think we can. It probably will have traffic impacts, but like I said, I think in general, at the community level, that's often a good thing, right? Nobody wants to have like a line of cars like queuing on their street, but it's probably preferable to having super fast moving cars on the street in a lot of ways. And I also live on one of these, actually two of these pretty quick collector and arterial streets. And yeah, I think I would gladly trade more congestion for a slower speed on a personal note. So with that, I'll leave you. This is my contact information. That's my supervisor, George Branyan, who manages the active transportation division. And I want to open it up for questions and comments and let you pepper me with any questions you have. One that I have for you is, following this, would you want me to give this similar presentation to the full ANSI, or will you brief them? I can give you the presentation. Just point of sort of what's the preference on that?
I can ask our chair, Seidel, who I know you were emailing with, because as you know, this is not our ANC, but it does have future impacts on our ANC.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things I was thinking about was what will be the knock-on effects for our ANC once this project is complete. So it's just nice to know that you all are already thinking ahead that far.
Yeah, and let me just confront that one head on, like, because the idea that like, oh, you're think of it as plumbing, right? So you're like constraining the pipe south of Benning, and so then all this spillback is going to happen north of Benning. But like that's why I want to tell you about this road diet and sort of lane reduction north of there. We also want to constrain the pipe north of there, and there's an active project that's sort of developing how to do that. And then the next step would be to mount all of that as well. And so they're each pretty significant corridors. Like I'm dealing with 3 miles of roadway in this chunk, and the part of 17th, it's another 3/4 of a mile or something, and then mount all of that would be like another mile and change. So it's sort of hard to do that much all at once, but I think it can all be done fairly quickly together in time, and that we should really think big about the whole corridor and what's happening on it and how to make it acceptable place to live along and be a pedestrian, be a cyclist, be a transit rider, because a lot of those are currently compromised so that we can have and it's not much, like a little bit more vehicular throughput, but coming with a bunch more danger, it's not a good trade-off.
Much agreed. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I'm Carrie Dulesky. I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. I live at 17th and L, so I'm just at the beginning. I'm glad to hear that the Arboretum entrances are going to get a change. And yeah, 17th north of Benning, it's been a very interesting 3 years living along the road and just seeing multiple accidents, incredibly narrow sidewalks. And as a cyclist, it feels incredibly dangerous to get all the way up to our street to go to the Arboretum, or to get to other bike lanes. I often get over to Trinidad because it's a little easier to connect to the network that way. So just thanks for being here. And I really look forward to hearing more about the plans. Do you have a sense of the timeline roughly of when they might start to address 17th and Mount Olivet north of Benning?
I know that they have a sketch concept for this road diet, and they've done a traffic analysis for it to see, if we do it, what's the impact? And they do these just so that, as much of the future you can know, you understand what's going to happen. And it's not, usually it's happen anyways. But now, we can communicate with the community what to expect and make that a reasonable prediction. So I'll try to catch up with our colleagues that are doing that. Because I'm really excited about the whole thing, right? Like all the way to 9th. We have one of my first like cycle track projects I worked on was the Brentwood Parkway one that basically gets up to that 9th and Mount Olivet intersection. And I think we could do, more and better connections up there with the bike facility on Mount Olivet coming through that at that point. So, and we have the West Virginia one that's new, right? Like as in just this fall, we finished it up. So as far as we can tell, it's been well used, and people are happy to, and not everyone, but people are generally happy that we made that change. But yeah, we're trying to just, sort of develop a real network that spans the city. I think the big overall in the sort of general vicinity, the biggest hurdles are still like Bladensburg Road and crossing New York Avenue. It's really difficult. There's only 4 total places to cross, sort of east of the Dave Thomas Circle intersection. And all of those aren't, like zero of them are very good for cycling right now. And they're all fairly constrained and like, filled with cars because there's only 4 places for the cars to cross. This whole 5-mile section of roadway, there's only 5 places you can cross from north to south, or 4 places to cross from north to south. So that's a place where we have a lot more work to do, trying to figure out like, maybe some really big capital infrastructure, like little bridges that cross here and there, or little tunnels that go in different places that can actually cross. Because it's not just New York Avenue, it's the railroad tracks as well that sort of restrict north-south movement across that overall corridor. But yeah.
Hi, Will. I was actually just going to ask about crossing New York Avenue, but I will push off that question. I am curious, since you've talked a lot about the corridors, what you might be able to say about some of the major intersections along those corridors. I'm thinking in particular of Bladensburg, Mount Olivet, 17th, that kind of 1 to maybe a 5 or 6 way crossing.
Yeah.
That's even actually hard to navigate if it's the first time you're coming to it in a car. I'm thinking particularly going east on Mount Olivet. So what might the bike infrastructure look like, or the pedestrian infrastructure look like, when all is said and done for that intersection and some other ones like it?
It's a great question. My colleague Karen is working on a corridor study of Bladensburg to try to figure out some of those questions. I think what we'll end up with that study, and I'm going to try to put my thumb on the scale a little bit, I think we'll end up with either a cycle track the whole way or protected bike lanes on each side of the street. Ideally, we would add some sidewalk space. Doing sidewalk changes with the moving curbs is expensive and complex because you have underground utilities you have to think about, you have drainage catch basins you have to think about. So it just, I'm very well aware because I've walked through there too. The sidewalks are extremely narrow, like pretty much the whole way on Bladensburg and the whole way on 17th. So yeah, once in a while I'll get ambitious and I'll run from my house to the Arboretum to go run inside. And I'm always like, just, head on a swivel because it's very tight. There aren't other sort of amenities like street trees that would also help make you feel and be more protected. So in general, I think like for Bladensburg, cycle tracks or cycle tracks or protected bike lanes along the corridor will probably be added. Maybe a transit component, maybe protected or a dedicated bus lanes. For 17th and Mount Olivet, 17th also would fit a road diet, but I think there in particular, the sidewalks are so narrow as to be kind of like, you almost have to confront the widening question, right? Like it's silly how when you get to a light pole, there's like 1.5 feet on one side and 1.5 feet on the other side. It's like, doesn't meet even our basic ADA standards for passage. So that's one where it's going to be really challenging to kind of fit everything in. And sometimes with these road diets, you really want to go to like almost like a 2-lane cross section. We did that with with Brentwood Parkway over by like sort of north of Union Market and over by Kip College Prep. At rush hour was 4 lanes, and now it's full-time parking, so, and a cycle track. So it's 2 lanes, parking, cycle track. And we have a much slower speed on that street, which was really the goal, right? It's a school zone, and it had like a 35 mile per hour set speed limit, but people would go down the hill very fast. And so anyways, we try to look at that. You guys are also on a hill at 17th. And, you know, I'd really love to hear more of the anecdotes that you might have, Carrie and Marie, because I think that really helps tell the story and is a way that we can reach some of the other professionals at VDOT with more of a, you know, getting out of professional, like analytical zone and really understanding how a street that's designed like that impacts how people live and sort of operate with it on a day-to-day basis. And you know, it's not okay to have crashes on streets, and and there's a lot that's on the engineering side, a lot that is on the enforcement side, and probably a lot on the regulating, you know, who can drive side, right? Like, I think the frontier is really going to be taking more people's driver's licenses away, taking more people's registrations away. And we have some good tools, right? Like, we have this automated traffic enforcement program, and we can now see that there are people that have $10,000 in violations in a very short amount of time. And I'm like, you know, that probably is the person that's telling us through their behavior that they can't reasonably be expected to drive in this city anymore. And so I think there are it's not really my bailiwick anymore to deal with those things. But at council and other places, I think those are really live and active conversations about how, you know, how we get to Vision Zero and who can really be operating on our roads. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around and kind of train of thought over on like, what else can we do? But yeah, I think all those corridors that you mentioned are in our sights to do something about. And I'm pretty committed to getting them all done. And I'll go back to the slide that shows, like, okay, so this is our Move DC map. This is sort of the master plan on what we will work on. And it's you know, the next 10 years to build this network. And it's pretty much everything we've talked about. There's Bladensburg, there's 17th, there's Mount Olivet. And I cut it off here just because I was, you know, focusing on this 2 projects, but you can see a bigger part of the network. There's other elements up there. Just in case you want to see, like, here's that future Arboretum Bridge is supposed to be here. And then we will have a connection. Now, this isn't fully fleshed out. We probably need some more work there. And then on, you know, other things that are in 5D, just because it's an edge street, 26th is a really interesting candidate to sort of follow the, you know, the edge of the golf course and wrap around and connect. Along Oklahoma Avenue, now we have the nice trail that's part of the RFK Fields. They've redone it recently. So, and then Benning Road is supposed to, well, with the streetcar expansion, we'll get a 2-way cycle track on the south side of the road that's not part of the sidewalk. Right now, you're sharing the sidewalk. There are a couple places it's fairly tight. The plan with the streetcar is to take one of the 4 lanes. There's 4 lanes eastbound, and that's pretty crash-prone corridor too. And to take one of those and make it a 2-way cycle track sort of next to the sidewalk. And we'll continue all the way over to East Capitol Street on Benning. So, you know, big plans coming. That's, I believe, was fully funded with, or at least significantly funded with one of the grants that just came out from the U.S. Department of Transportation. The bridge, at least, over the freeway and railroad tracks was like, it got like $15 million of US DOT funding. That was one of the necessary steps to get that streetcar project to completion. So that's another thing coming. Go ahead.
Hey, Will, can we ask a couple quick specific questions?
Yes, please.
So when you say road diet for 17th north of Benning, are you saying likely just a road diet, or also bicycle facility?
Bicycle facilities is likely, although because of the constrained sidewalks, we just have to sharpen our pencils and try to figure out how to fit the things that we would like in the roadway. But I would definitely go to a 2-lane cross section before you have 4 lanes now, right? I would go to 2 lanes before I would get rid of safe bicycling infrastructure or narrower sidewalks, right? Like I want to make the sidewalks sufficiently wide. I want to have a place for people to ride their bikes safely. And then after we've satisfied that, we can talk about, does the road have enough vehicular capacity? It's like, we're not going to be raising any homes. That's like, the era before us that was doing that kind of stuff. No one, that doesn't really happen anymore. So you're kind of fixed, right? You have, and I think it's only like 40 feet between the curbs today. You really only need about 22 for the cars to have 1 lane in each direction, and the rest could be something else. So you have 18 feet potential other stuff.
And then on Mount Olivet, with the current situation with DC water tunneling, we've got a great natural experiment in the road diet. Is there data being collected right now about that could help justify making that permanent?
I'm a keen observer of that, and
I run up that every day, and I'm like counting wait times and stuff. So I hope that someone who
if you want to take some videos, or even just whatever you collect, if it's sort of quantitative, and share with us. Enough anecdotes become data, right? And especially if there's something you can count. And I am working with our research team to try to get more resources that we can just deploy quickly for things like Florida Avenue is another place, and R Street's another place where these things are happening sort of as a natural experiment as a result of these big DC water dig sites. And we should, like Florida Northwest is another place that it's like a pretty dangerous cross section for lots of reasons. And with the DC water thing, they went down to 2 lanes, and it seemed like people still were able to travel on Florida Avenue in cars. So my sense is it works, right? 1 lane in each direction in an urban environment is enough to get that level of mobility. Peak hour can be a little different, but most of our roadways are sort of, they're fixed sort of in space and geometry, but we spend a ton of time thinking about what happens during the peak hour historically, and congestion during the peak hour, meaning rush hour, right? Well, rush hours aren't happening anymore. They haven't happened in the old way for 2 years because of COVID. And I don't know about you guys, but half my week I spend working from my living room, because my employer is this is how you're going to work out from home. My wife is a federal employee, and they've told her work from home. We don't have an expectation of when you might come back into the office. And most likely, if you would like to keep working from home, that will be an option for you. So the paradigm of everybody going into the downtown, between 7 and 9 a.m. every single weekday, and vice versa at the departure hours, is just not, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, and we need to make some different plans as a result. And one is that, rush hours can be thought of as different, differently than we used to. We still have it kind of around schools, school, if you've ever seen a school pick up or drop off, those could be pretty zany. But yeah, just the whole practice of transportation planning right now is in a big state of we know things have changed, but we can't exactly define it nor predict what will happen in the future, though we're starting to get a sense based on work habits. I wouldn't want to be in downtown real estate right now, that's for sure.
Well, can I jump in again with one more specific question? The Trinidad and Montello Ave, I know those are both one way. There was some consideration of a Contraflow bike lanes. I know there was cameras out a couple years ago collecting data. I haven't heard anything about that since. Is that something that may happen?
It's certainly on our, like they're there right on the list. Just geometrically, those fit, and there are streets that have pretty simple stop controls and signal controls where they have them. It's not super complex. I would probably go with, if it was just my choice, I would probably try to do contraflows. I think that would have a better traffic calming, but we could also do them as regular bike lanes. So they're not going to be like our protected. We're mostly focused on like all hands on deck to try to do more protected bike facilities, but there is certainly a role for the traditional style ones. And I think they're good candidates. And if you at 5D would really like to see them happen, if you can tell us that in a resolution, that gives me the kind of ammunition I need to like, prioritize it at the agency, get some resources behind it. And I think they'd be pretty simple projects, right? Like mostly you do a parking restriction for like, maybe 1 week on each corridor that as you're doing it. And then pretty much all the parking would come back. There's not, traditional bike lanes or Contraflow lanes, there's not the big setbacks for alleys and things. They're narrow enough that you really couldn't fit protected lanes unless you were prepared to take all the parking off one side. And they're already one lane, one direction. So there's not like an extra traveling you can go after. So, reading the tea leaves, I know parking, especially like in front of homes is residential homes, probably the hardest thing in our line of work to remove. So yeah, I'd say like, if you want regular bike lanes or Contraflow, just tell us in a resolution. And I think we could probably fit those into your schedule.
I live on Trinidad, and just as a traffic calming tool, when we're basically being told we can't add more stop signs or speed bumps because of, it's an emergency route and bus line. So that seems like one of the other viable tools for traffic calming, narrowing that travel lane. And then also you just like watch people ride the Contraflow lane already, even though it doesn't exist. And so it's like a natural, like just the thing that people already need and do.
Yeah, and it feels like you're attacking me on that one.
I watch Cole ride every day down my block the wrong way, which is a good thing. You should continue to do that.
Yeah, the benefit of Contraflow generally is that you end up with speed control in both directions. So like people can, it becomes a two-way street for bikes, one-way street for cars. The other thing we're looking at in other neighborhoods, and you can see it on 8th Street Northwest, like in Tacoma, we do these. So 8th Street Northwest, they'd already set it up like this. We just added the bike lanes later, but it's sort of like alternating one ways. So for cars, you can't go through on this corridor. And the reason they set that up is because it's right next to Georgia, which has like, 30,000 cars a day or some large number. And so people get frustrated and like cut over to the nearest residential street and try to like zoom down it. So they set up these alternating one ways way back when, and we just took the extra space to put in the bike lanes. But you do Contraflow with like the Sharrow in the direction of travel. And then you get a two-way, a pair of two-way bike streets so you can go either direction safely. And then the bikes have a bit of a traffic controlling or speed controlling effect on any cars there. And I think that's the big problem in Trinidad, right? Like you once in a while have some pretty out of control drivers. And I'm, hey, my street too, the Dodge Charger crowd in this town. It's always Dodges and some Mustangs, but mostly Dodges. It's like, hey, we market a vehicle to be driven dangerously and aggressively, and go figure, people drive them dangerously and aggressively. My gosh, who could have predicted? So yeah, I think it's a good project. I think what we're trying to do is work those in sort of between the bigger projects, and we've been trying to develop more like overall capacity to do more projects in more places all at the same time. And we have this past year, we developed, I think all told, we did over 10 miles of bike facilities or bike, on-street bike facilities, not including trails. Trails was like another 4 miles. And that's our biggest year ever by like 3 or 4 extra miles over any prior year. So it's working. We've had hey, if you want to come work for us, we have a couple jobs that are being posted in the next week or two. So we're hiring more bike planners, we're hiring more trail planners, hiring a lot more staff at DDOT, and this will allow us to help like expand capacity even more. So it's really central to what we do as an agency is trying to make sure these bike facilities are both, catering to a broader cross section of users, also that we're connecting them properly in more places, and we're not just giving up, where it gets hard. We try to work through the hard spots. Sometimes it's very contentious, but it's worth it in the end. But yeah, that's what we're trying to deliver. So again, the timeline for this is if we can, come up with all the concepts and get through our core planning work this winter, we would be building this probably early fall this coming year. It's pretty quick turnaround all told. So if you know of anyone who I need to talk to in this court, I know you guys are north of it, but that's usually like daylighting all the people that could get mad at us. Like we want to talk to them early so that we get the fury one-on-one, not like calling the mayor and telling the mayor to fire us. It's better to talk to them in person. That's the kind of stuff we often appreciate any sort of help with. But yeah, let me know if you'd like to have a full presentation to the ANC. I promise I'll keep the non-topical chatter down. But yeah, that's what we're up to, trying to do this project.
That sounds good. Appreciate it. Well, and I just wanted to bring up one comment that Kevin threw into the chat. Just one consideration about Bladensburg Road is that, as you mentioned, with all the new density going up with the apartment buildings, we're starting to see a bit of an uptick in delivery vehicles that are double parked. So that is just something to keep in mind going forward.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, like we have a pretty good development review crowd over at DDOT that actually helps set the programming for like how deliveries are supposed to happen at new buildings. They mostly insist on loading and delivery happening, at least designed into the building. So it's happening like inside the envelope of the ground floor or the basement. However, as you know, like Uber and Lyft drivers, Uber Eats and such, they don't often want to do that. And they will kind of, or Amazon delivery, everybody, like we do a pretty thorough job. I think just for your, future information, what I think the solution is, in a big way, is probably putting in like 1 or 2 loading and delivering spaces per block throughout the city, right? So you'd reserve, 40 to 80 feet of every street, residential or not, for some short-term like pull in, pull out, because that scale of loading and delivery that's actually happening. And we haven't made a change of that scale, but it, what it affects is like, especially in residential areas, it's like most like, every space is set up as a RPP or ROP or, some sort of residential condition for the most part. So there's not that much turnover and, a lot more car storage than might be desirable and little space for people who are doing loading and delivery. So keep that in mind. It's probably it's a bigger issue and not exactly central to what I do, although we have a role since we don't want people blocking the bike lanes because it's the most convenient space, and we don't want them blocking fire hydrants or those
exactly
backs from intersections that are there so you can see pedestrians crossing, which is really where a lot of the loading delivery is happening now, is like people just take that. So the thing that is in the safety first paradigm, right? So like if safety is first, and the safe movement of goods and people is like top, and then like capacity is like 2 or 3 or 4, kind of down towards the bottom of like what are we trying to do at DDOT is storage of private vehicles. It's like really, that's not about safety, but and it doesn't matter in terms of like the other mission, which is like congestion relief or moving people. However, when we go to neighborhoods, we find it's often like the top priority. And some neighborhoods really have a case for it. Like there's no other parking besides like curbside. Then we have other neighborhoods where it's like, oh, we've all converted our garages to music rooms and workshops. And so we park in the street because we've, taken the space that was built into our homes and supposed to store the cars and made it something else, because it was just much more valuable way to like arrange our real estate. And that's a very compelling argument for
great. At least. Okay. Well, again, Will, thanks for taking, the time to meet with us. We really appreciate it, especially on such last minute. I will let you know tomorrow whether we'd like you to present at our meeting on Tuesday. So just keep an eye out for that email.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. You too. Okay. All right. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to skip around a little bit on our agenda. First, we have a new member, and Jill. She's not here tonight, but hopefully we'll see her next month. And I noticed that Marie is here. So Marie, nice to meet you. We're happy to have you on board. And I think since Kevin is here, we'll just go ahead and we'll just have a quick discussion about coordinating between his committee and ours.
Hey guys, you chose the exact second when I had some candy in my mouth here, and you caught me. Yeah, I was, so Stephen reached out to me and he was like, hey, we're thinking about we should coordinate work between the two committees. And there are times when it comes up. I remember we, on the zoning committee, we've had seen some projects recently actually come up, rehash something that was discussed on Bladensburg Road, where I forget where it was, where Bardo's was. There's a building going up there. I think it's like 50 something units with no parking. And our concern, and I think the ANC opposed it, the concern there was that we know there's people going to double park with all the deliveries, and we're actually concerned about creating safety. And so, my comment to Will had more to do with it. When he goes to design bike lanes on Bladensburg, he needs to assume that people are going to double park and will try to double park in the bike lanes. So if there are bike lanes there, that was our main reason why we were kind of well, the zoning committee doesn't oppose or support anything. We just do research and give the facts to the ANC. But I know one of the reasons why people weren't a fan of it, and then the ANC eventually didn't support it. I'm quite sure what coordination will look like. It might just be myself and another couple of people always attend this meeting, so we're in the loop on this type of stuff. I actually found the presentation very useful, and perhaps vice versa. Maybe there's maybe Stephen or another couple of members from this committee want to become regular attendees on the zoning committee. I'm just brainstorming here.
So I think I flagged this at our last meeting, and what I kind of had in mind was, and it was actually inspired by that exact same project you mentioned, where I sat in on the zoning committee meeting, and there was all this concern about how there wasn't parking being built for this building. And I'm, in my mind, as someone who's focused on the transportation side, I was so excited that we're finally getting away from parking minimums, which in my opinion are one of the most destructive policies that we have in our cities across this country, basically building in the idea that, developers have to pay for people to store their cars, and drives up the cost of housing. It encourages people to drive. And so there's just like some issues like that where our two committees are going to think about things differently. And so if you're coming across like a BZA case, for example, and there's an element like a special exception for waiving the parking minimum, or a variance that has to do with some transportation issue, loading and drop off stuff, you could, this is just like one potential mechanism. You could like flag that piece of it and like shoot it over to this group so we could think about it and give our opinion. That would be like one way to do it, or some other just way to like trigger the other committee taking a look at the agenda item of the other one, and weighing in. So that was my like first thought of how that could possibly work.
No, I appreciate it. And I think it's probably, I like the idea of maybe when we are writing up a zoning report to the ANC commissioners, just summary doing it, we should probably get input on each report, each document we send to the ANC commissioners. We should make sure that we have passed that under the nose of your guys, so we can get your opinion. It doesn't always mean we have to agree on everything, although I would say personally, I was okay with the lack of parking on that big project that's going in there. My concern was they had zero rear access. And even those, I think the same owners, there's the other lot at the other corner, I forget what the street is. There was just no plan to provide any access to the rear. And I'm like, everyone's just going to do the deliveries on Bladensburg, and they're just going to double park and create unsafe conditions. And we're going to have, you know, cyclists is going to be going down the road and going to speed into traffic. So,
so Kevin, just because your committee's been operating for much longer, and you know, I don't even know what the reports look like you send to the full commission, or like operationally how long it takes and who reviews what. Like, do you see a viable way to like get feedback, like on the timelines you work on, like sending something to this committee? Like, I don't know if we'd even have a meeting before you have to turn it around, stuff like that, like the actual logistics of what I just threw out.
I think it probably just forces us to be more timely. And I will say, like, we probably only do up a report for half. I know there's ANCs in the city that are very professional. Every single, you know, special exception request, there's a detailed report. Generally, we only like send reports when the ANC, you know, if it's something kind of controversial, or if there's something where there's a lot of community interest, and then we'll provide something. You know, generally you know, if a report is, they're generally pulled, not pushed. So it's not like we don't have a policy where for every single special, some special exceptions are very simple, you know, and like there's nothing controversial about this, and the ANC doesn't need us giving them any, you know, background information or any research. But if it's something controversial, I think we can just make it a point to be sure that it's, you know, we'll just need to be aware of the timelines, you know.
Yeah, I think that might be a good, at least, way forward, just to try. I think maybe if we could have someone sit in on your meetings, and either you, Kevin, or someone from your committee could sit on our meetings, depending on what is on the agenda, that might be helpful. And then, yeah, if you think, Kevin, it would be a good idea if we could just take a pass at any sort of reports, if there are transportation implications, I think that would be the way to go. And this doesn't have to be very formal. I think just the tight timelines here means it can't by necessity be very formal. But I think if we could just try that out and for a few months and then maybe reassess.
Gotcha. And I think next Thursday is the third Thursday of the month. It is, yeah. So next week is both the second Tuesday ANC public meeting and the third Thursday. So Stephen, next Thursday, if you guys want to figure out who wants to attend our meeting, where I think we meet at, we have a, what do you call it? We do an internal planning meeting in the time. I think that's at 7:30, and then the public meeting is at 8. And usually it's like 8 to 9. If there's a lot, sometimes it stretches to 9:30.
Great.
So
do you know if there's anything on the agenda that like would be of particular interest to this group at this point, or is that?
I haven't checked the email in a couple of weeks. So actually I need to go through it and send out like the 1 week reminder. Hey, everybody, a week from now. There has actually been a surprising, I don't know, is it something to do with COVID or what, but there's been a massive decrease in the number of special exception requests and what I would consider like a controversial. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, like kind of, you know, when we set this committee, or well, it wasn't. There just was a lot of, I would say, egregious development that was occurring that was like taking advantage of neighbors. for people's houses, and now it seems most of the special exception requests these days are much more reasonable. So.
Well, Kevin, I remember way back when this committee was first set up, we were hoping that the committee would serve as a check on those kinds of things. So maybe it's actually worked.
I think that's happening, but although I always tell, anytime I would actually hope developers are asking for more special exceptions if it comes to like another unit or family size units, so I hope we're not like, retarding development. I think the zoning development committee was more just to be sure that like neighbors were being taken care of, or just weren't being taken advantage of, or were aware of their rights. That if somebody was going to go, shade their solar panels or do something, we could inform them and help them. But yeah, there's definitely, I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but I can say I do feel there's been a lot fewer. It seemed 3 years ago, it was a lot of more animosity. And now I think most of the development seems to be more well supported.
Yeah. Well, does anyone else have any questions or comments or any thoughts? Okay, great. Well, Kevin, thanks again for agreeing to speak with us, and we look forward to working with your committee in the future.
Sure. I'll turn off my video, but I'm going to hang up.
Stephen, I don't know if you're trying to talk, but you're on mute. We could probably maybe use some guidance on where we're going on the agenda.
Oh, little Andrew.
How about that? Okay. Well, yeah, we're on old business and updates, and I'm just going to go through it quickly. Feel free to interrupt me if you want. Okay, so we have new Ward 5 liaisons with DDOT. We have Delando Baker. Marika Tapp has moved on, and Kelly Jong Olsen has been promoted and now oversees the outreach for DDOT. And at Mokers, we have Christopher Ingram, and he's working with Nokomis, who's been with Ward 5 Mokers for a long time. Next, as Will mentioned, there is the Bladensburg Multimodal Safety and Access Study. I've been talking to our Ward 5 liaison about it, and the last update I got, which was earlier this week, it was that the project is a little delayed. It's still in the procurement phase, but they anticipate awarding a contract for it by the end of the year, and I believe that's for the design. So hopefully next year we'll start seeing some preliminary drawings. Finally, I'll skip over resident co-chair for now, just because I just want to keep moving. All right. So for the discussion, again, I want to thank Andrew and everyone else for hopping on that for the emergency meeting on the West Virginia Avenue bike lanes. I was in Europe 6 hours ahead, so it would have been at like 2 in the morning for my time when this meeting happened, and I learned about it the day of. So it all happened kind of quickly, and I just want to thank everyone who participated. And for those who took notes as well, the notes were very helpful.
That was all Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah.
So it was Carrie and myself that was on.
Great. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you. I know, just sort of not to keep going back to the West Virginia Avenue bike lanes, but I mean, there's still just a little. Most people who were concerned about it have moved on. They've adjusted, moved on, and that's that. There are still a couple people who are making noise about it, and I think, as commissioners, we want to make sure that everyone's heard, and I think that's kind of what it was. I don't get any sense that anyone on the ANC seriously wants to undo the bike lanes, so I wouldn't be concerned about that. Is that sort of the impression that you got, Andrew and Carrie?
Well, I don't know, Carrie, if you want to jump in. I mean, yes, it sounds like the two commissioners who are on are hearing from some people who don't like the project, and for various reasons. There was definitely some just lack of clarity on process, and a lot of like she said kind of stuff that didn't seem to reflect like really what was going on. Like, oh, we heard in the first meeting that they weren't going to take these spots, but then they did, and it was like, well, I don't think that was actually what was ever reflected in the NOI. And so I think like our committee could help with like just parsing through the facts of the matter when these questions come up. One thing that like really did kind of concern me was one of the commissioners kind of like accused the DDOT representative of lying about the road paving, and it was kind of like he said, when you lied about the road paving, that really escalated tensions. And I'm like, what I'm hearing is you're accusing someone of lying, and that's what's escalating tensions. And like, yes, government gets things wrong and doesn't deliver on things all the time. And so I just like, that was like the biggest like red flag concerning moment of how all that went down. And like this idea that we have this strained relationship in our ANC with DDOT. And it's like, I think we gotta like look in the mirror if that's how we're talking to them.
Yeah. Carrie, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like Andrew said, I think I got the sense that there were several changes that happened as the project moved along, and that perhaps the DDOT wasn't updating the commissioners as frequently as maybe they needed to know to like liaise with their constituents, and that they're just really feeling the heat right now. And that's understandable. So I think that now that we have a transit committee for when there's projects going on in our ANC, that, you know, we can be kind of the connector and that gap fill to make sure that, you know, maybe because we have a vested interest, we're going to be keeping up with those updates and making sure that they can be shared at the monthly meetings. They noted that, like, you know, you were at February 2020 meeting, and then several months went by and we never heard from you. And then, you know, suddenly in August or something, we heard another update. So maybe that's partly on our responsibility, is to make sure DDOT's coming to our meetings, or that we're passing along those updates to residents so that it's much more transparent, regular communication. I was definitely sensing hostility from both of the commissioners. Yeah, which made me uncomfortable, but you know, I maybe having a conversation with them as well, that we can, you know, as ever, I think when there's issues, it's always like a few people that are unhappy and have the loudest voices. I just from knowing mobility projects, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more people helped by it that maybe haven't said anything at all. But, you know, you got to take care of, you got to make sure that everybody's kind of taken care of to the best, you know, best means possible.
Yeah, I really agree with what you both said. I think that the communication on behind the scenes, the communication on this project, it could have been better, but I don't think it maybe was as bad as some people have made it out to be. The lack of paving actually was a complete utter surprise. We didn't know that they were not going to pave the road until we saw the flex post going in. So that was a little disappointing, but things happen, you know. And then as far as other aspects of the project, I think it's just a matter of some people not necessarily being familiar with just how bureaucracy works. But Carrie, I think you raised a really good point, is that we can act as a mediator between the ANC and the DDOT, because we know our ANC and we know DDOT, you know. So I think part of the conflict between the two right now is just because the ANC just isn't really familiar with DDOT all that much, and DDOT just, a bunch of us are brand new commissioners. DDOT doesn't have established relationships with us. So I think it's a lack of common ground, and I think maybe we can help be that common ground. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing. And I think, like tonight, having someone from DDOT come before us and present the project, that would let us be able to package it and explain it accurately and in a way that, you know, everyone will understand. Because it's one thing to talk about, you know, levels of service and road widths and PBLs be cycle tracks, you know, and it's another thing to just put it into plain language that anyone who's not totally into transportation would fully understand. Yeah. Okay. So anyone else have anything? If not, I'll move on. Okay, great. The next thing, as Will mentioned, the DDOT Benning Road streetcar and bikeway project. I did not know that there was going to be a separated bike lane over the bridge. That's very exciting. But I guess we can find out more next week because DDOT is holding 2 virtual public meetings, December 14th at noon and December 15th at 6:30 p.m. I'm planning to attend one of those. Which one just depends on, I guess, how my week shapes out. But I would encourage all of you to attend because this is going to have major implications for how people get into and out of our ANC and across the river.
Sorry, is that both on December 14th?
Sorry, what was that?
Those are both on December 14th.
It's December 14th at noon, December 15th at 6:30.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, do you know if our ANC has passed a resolution in support of the extension or not?
I actually introduced a resolution back in March or April. The focus at the time was on the streetcar. It was a resolution more broadly for all the changes that were going on. And that resolution actually failed, but I think because the focus here right now isn't on the cycle track anymore. It's on everything else, but DDOT has decided that they're going forward with it. So I think we could, before the resolution tried to influence the question of whether or not DDOT should do this at all, DDOT has answered yes. So now I think we can pass a narrower resolution saying, well, if DDOT is going to do this, we think this is what it should look like. So
yeah. Well, the only thing I'd raise is that the streetcar extension continues to be this political football, and we've got a candidate for mayor, Robert White, who's like pretty good on a lot of this stuff, who doesn't support the extension because like there's a whole faction in the council that wants to move that money into leases. And so I mean, yes, DDOT is planning as if they're going to build it. It just would it's not a done deal. So just to say, supporting the project, I think still would be useful. What are they I wonder if there's a way to tweak it and bring it up again. I was surprised that one failed, and I felt like that was just like one of these things where commissioners didn't know what was going on, and so they were scared and abstained. If I remember correctly. Anyway, just that's my 2 cents on the issue.
Yeah. I when I posed that resolution at our committee of the whole meeting, I thought it had the momentum, but I think there's just a lot of historical hangups from the commissioners who have lived here a long time about what a mess the H Street stretch of it was. It's a very fraught topic, but I think if we were to introduce a resolution talking about other aspects of it, I think that would go down a lot better. So yeah, I will definitely attend one of those. They're the same meetings, so just attend either one if you want. I'll attend one of them, and we can talk about the content of a resolution after that. Okay, so now I guess we'll just go on to open discussion. If anyone has anything, I would just say maybe let's keep it short since we're already going so much over. Anything?
Only thing I was going to mention is I'd love to, if we could get a contact for the 17th kind of Mount Olivet Bladensburg, whoever's leading on that from DDOT, just to have their contact information, keep in touch, see if they could come speak at a future meeting with us.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll reach out to Will about that.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, the idea of tracking TSIs, Cole, I think you set something up, but I didn't really fully.
I mean, I pulled everything out of the TSI page, but there's such limited information on the DDOT TSI page. I do think it's worth tracking because once a request is deleted or moved or whatever, there's no record of it on that dashboard. So if it's rejected by DDOT, we wouldn't know from a historical purpose that's already been submitted. But I don't know, and maybe that's a question for another DDOT contact. Is there a way for us to request for more detail on each of the ongoing TSIs? I mean, that's just kind of my initial thought. Like, I don't really know what kind of knowledge base is going to be the most useful to build, since this is so new to me, but at least like that's what I would want to know.
Yeah, and Cole, thanks for putting that together. That's really helpful. I would say that TSIs that have been rejected for traffic calming are arguably more important than anything, because we see this time and time again. The commissioner who came before me, he put in a TSI for 16th and Levis. That was rejected. I put in another one. That was rejected. And it's always just the same things. It's all just goes back to, you know, there were this many cars, they were going this fast, there have been no accidents in this long that MPD says there have been. And I think it just shows that these metrics are not ideal. But I think if we can find someone at DDOT who would have more information about TSIs, past and present, that would be great. Another option that I can do is I can just look through my inbox, and I can encourage the other commissioners to look through their inboxes, because I know actually today I got responses from 3 separate TSIs, 2 of which were closed without comment. One of which, Montello, between Queen and Penn, they're going to add more signage to increase awareness or something. It's not what we were hoping for, but one step at a time. But I'll ask the commissioners about forwarding me any TSIs they've had that have been closed or are pending.
I think that's great. I'm happy to try and update this, and we can, or I guess, I mean, ideally over time, we'd add in ANC comments and other committee notes just to help build that kind of history, but yeah, starting somewhere.
Definitely. Okay. Anyone have anything else?
I'm interested in just going off of what Will kind of invited, is like proactive resolution requests for the good stuff we want. We don't have to name all of those things right now, but like, I want to push forward for Contraflow lanes on Montello and Trinidad, for example. Like push hard on the Montello question to make sure that happens. So the stuff that's not really in the official pipeline, but we know they're thinking about over there, just find some ways to show support from the ANC that we want this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be, I've been dreaming to Trinidad pretty much, but it's really too late to get that on the agenda for our December meeting. That could be really good for our January meeting. Especially because if we can get a resolution after the winter,
I will see you at the end of the day. I'm your teacher. Oh,
sorry, I need to mute this child. We could just start a Google shared doc. We put the like more proactive things we want to ask for. Just, you know, there's probably a lot, or maybe not a ton, but like I could see having a nice like shared place to start the brainstorming process, so we don't have to just do it on these calls.
Great. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Unless there's anything urgent, it's almost 9:30, so I think we should probably wrap this up. Yeah.
Talk and
I just want to thank everyone for coming. And I will get working on things that we talked about tonight. And of course, if there's anything else that we should discuss, just feel free to send an email to the group. And I look forward to seeing everyone, if not this Tuesday, then at next month's meeting.
Sounds great.
All right.
You want to say bye, Moses? You say bye? Yeah. You say bye? This is Moses. He was supposed to be asleep 2 hours ago.
Hi, Moses.
Welcome to my life.
Keep fighting the good fight, Moses.
We have Wonder Woman and Peppa Pig's mommy. So
sleep till Brooklyn, Moses. You can
all All right, see y'all.
All right, bye everyone.